Today we're going to talk about 9 pieces of camping and backpacking gear that I should have bought a lot sooner than I did. Each piece of gear that I'm going to mention took several years to learn about and dial in, and I could not imagine going on a trip without them. After we talk about each individual piece of gear, I'm going to give you a favorite or two that I recommend. A comfortable quilt. You might be wondering first, what the heck is a quilt? Well, it's basically a minimalist sleeping bag. It's a sleeping bag that has no back to it. And I know that sounds strange, but stay with me. When you lay in a sleeping bag, all that insulation underneath you're laying on is obviously compressed. And when it's compressed, it's essentially useless. That's because the insulation is only good when it can keep warm air in it. And when you compress it, it's like letting air out of a balloon. A compressed sleeping bag is a cold sleeping bag. Not having a back means you can simply rely on your sleeping pad as the insulation, which means a quilt can be just as warm, but also much lighter weight and costs less money. It's a win-win-win.
Win-win-win.
No.
It's also a great option for side sleepers since you use it more like a blanket. Now, the downside to a quilt is that it can have drafts if it's not strapped down properly, which means I'll still sometimes use a full sleeping bag in more extreme cold situations, but nonetheless, I personally think a quilt is the way to go to save weight. My recommendation is either the Outdoor Vitals Stormloft quilt or the Zenbivy light bed. Both are really good options and are really comfortable. The Outdoor Vitals quilt is a great minimalistic option, while the Zenbivy provides a bit extra comfort as a small weight penalty. A warm sleeping pad. While you may think of a sleeping pad as something you're buying so you don't have to be uncomfortable on the ground, that is not the only thing to consider. If you want your new minimalistic quilt to stay warm, you'll want a sleeping pad with a high R value. Lying on cold ground is gonna suck the heat out of your quilt or your sleeping bag like a mosquito on a beach. So, you'll need a sleeping pad to have enough insulation to match your new quilt's insulation rating. R value is how they measure it. Make sure the pad is ASTM rated for about 4 or higher to get you through the colder nights in the fringe seasons. Sleeping pads that are comfortable and keep you warm, which is what you're going for, do cost a bit more, so keep that in mind when shopping for cheap ones on Amazon. I'd recommend the Nemo Tensor or the Big Agnes Rapide. Both are ASTM rated and super comfortable and lightweight. Lightweight trekking poles. If there is one piece of hiking gear that people shy away from buying, it's trekking poles. For a lot of people, they have this stigma like a cane for some old dude. I used to think the same thing until I bought a pair. They're super helpful to keep you balanced on trail and transfer the weight of your heavy backpack onto your arms. They also make it possible for you to use a trekking pole tent and save even more weight in your backpack. I prefer the twist lock over the flip lock because they slide much easier down into a water bottle pocket for storage without getting caught up. I can't tell you how many times they've saved me from falling as well. A great, inexpensive pair is the Phison Compact Trekking Poles. A single pole is 5 ounces all in, and they only cost like $70 for a pair. It's an almost unbeatable value for what you get. Accurate navigation. Remember when an old school map and compass was the way to go? Yeah, me neither. That's how long it's been since I've used a paper map on trail or even seen anyone use a paper map on trail. It's definitely the way of the past. People have moved on to GPS navigation. Now, if you're thinking like Google or Apple Maps, think again. There are a limited number of trails you can find on there, but those apps aren't made for deep backcountry travel, and if you're planning on backpacking, that's exactly what you're gonna be doing. I use an app called Onyx Backcountry. It's definitely better than any free map you're gonna use because you can plan your entire trip on the app. From finding a location that allows you to hike and camp by avoiding private land and only using public land that's legal to camp on, to seeing real satellite weather data to plan for the possibility of ice and snow. You can even find water sources, lookout points, and designated campsites. It accurately shows where you're at on trail and keeps you from getting lost. It even has features for climbers, mountain bikers, and skiers. Now, obviously, you should pack in a simple trail map of the area in addition to any GPS map, but this app is one of the cheapest items on this list, and it's truly one of the best investments you're going to make. They've given me a 20% off code for my viewers, so the price is down from $30 to only $24 for the year. I've left a link in the description of this video, and you can help support this channel by buying the app, as they are the sponsor of this video. So Onyx, thanks for sponsoring the video. A canister stove. Stoves for backpacking are a whole separate thing. You can really go down a rabbit hole learning about them. From big heavy jet boils to extremely lightweight alcohol stoves. And while those do have their place and people do argue for their favorite, I find that a canister stove is the most reliable, dependable, and simple to use. It just requires a fuel canister, which can add a bit of weight. And it's also kind of a pain to throw away as a compressed can. But a canister stove simply screws onto a canister and it's lit by either a self-igniter or a lighter. And a good one works every single time. I just make sure mine has a regulator on it so it'll work better at different elevations. My two favorites are the MSR Pocket Rocket Deluxe and the Soto Amicus. Both are lightweight and have a self-ignition, so I don't have to search for my lighter. If I had to choose, I think the MSR would slightly edge out the Soto, as I've heard of problems with the igniter and have actually experienced it myself. A lightweight backpack. Picking out a backpack is as personal as picking out a new pair of shoes. Most new hikers will buy a bag solely based on size, so they can carry as much stuff as possible. But as being one of the big three items you'll carry, the other two being your tent and your sleep system, buying a lightweight pack can really help you cut a ton of weight you'll be carrying. Not only that, but lightweight packs are typically more minimalistic, which forces you to really consider what you're actually bringing and helps you leave unnecessary stuff at your house. These types of packs are usually made out of lightweight materials that are unfortunately more expensive, but your back will thank you for it. I have three that I actually recommend. The Z-Packs Arc Haul Ultra, the Outdoor Vitals CS40, and the least expensive of the three and still really comfortable, the Outdoor Vitals Shadow Light. Just make sure you measure your torso before buying, because that's how backpacks are sized. So a medium pack means it's meant for a medium-sized torso. You will thank me when you don't have to return it for not fitting. A pack liner. I learned this one the hard way when a few years ago I decided that my backpack was waterproof on its own. But when it rained for the entire 10 hours of my hike in almost freezing weather, I realized I made a huge mistake. All my gear was absolutely soaked to the point I could wring out my sleeping bag. And I had to bail back to my truck or I would risk hypothermia. That was the last trip I made without a pack liner. It's basically just a bag to put everything in you don't want to get wet. There are several on the market, and honestly, most are just an unnecessary upsell. And while buying one means they're most likely going to last you a while, you can just as easily use a garbage bag. A tip to make it even easier for you is to put the bag inside your pack first and then pack it up. Trail runners. Most new hikers will immediately think, I gotta go buy a pair of hiking boots for this trip. That's honestly one of the biggest mistakes I see. While a new pair of boots can keep your foot dry, give you a bit of ankle support, and even slightly warm, they also do something super nasty to virtually everyone that wears them. About 2 miles into your hike, your feet are gonna start to hurt and blisters will start to form. Why? It's because they are heavy. You aren't used to wearing them, and they are constantly rubbing on your feet in the same spot. They're absolutely miserable for most people. And honestly, most people who think they need an ankle support actually don't. Hiking boots really don't brace an ankle as much as you'd think. I am so glad I found trail runners. They're basically a standard sneaker, but a really aggressive tread. It's the best of both worlds. It's like wearing your favorite comfortable shoes, but they have good tread for the backcountry. They even make waterproof trail runners. Now, I usually don't recommend a brand of trail runners because everyone's foot is so different. My favorite brand though has been Brooks for my high arches, and the Cascadia has a really nice wide toe box so my toes don't rub against each other. A good battery bank. People are using their phones in the backcountry for a ton of reasons. Listening to music on a hike, watching a movie in the tent, and navigating. And most new hikers have no idea how to pick out a good battery bank to charge it up. So depending on your electronic usage, you're gonna find that battery banks are rated for capacity in what are called milliamp hours. Now I'd recommend a bank that has at least 10,000 milliamp hours, or more for a 3 to 4 day trip. If you got a bigger phone, or you take lots of pictures, or you watch tons of movies, you're gonna wanna go even larger. But one interesting thing to note is that the battery bank industry does not have any standard that governs if they're telling you the truth about a capacity. So basically, some brands may say they're a 10,000 milliamp hour battery while actually having 5,000 milliamp hours. In all my testing of battery banks, the brand Anker is so far the most reliable and accurate to what they say their battery bank's capacity is. And I have never had one fail. I hope all this stuff helps you guys out. I will leave all of this stuff in the description box below, and I will see you on the next one.
YouTube is a rabbit hole of information. So in order to solve that problem, I wrote a backpacking course where I took my 10 years of backpacking experience and the 400 YouTube videos that I filmed and condensed it down into just 18 videos and a few lessons for you to learn. All you have to do is go to my brand new website, danbeckeroutdoors.com, and look for the course.